Hey everyone, welcome. I am absolutely pumped you're joining us today. We're about to embark on this totally fascinating microhistory investigation. Think of us as, well, linguistic detectives, right? We're going to solve a 2,000-year-old cold case that's literally buried inside one of the most famous ancient texts in the world. So, get ready, because this explainer is going to completely change how you look at a conversation you probably thought you already had figured out.
Okay, let's dive right in by, embracing our inner Sherlock Holmes. Just like the famous detective himself said, the little things are infinitely the most important. And that hits the nail on the head for us today. We're going to look at how a single, tiny, seemingly insignificant, and honestly entirely overlooked word completely alters our understanding of this monumental historical dialogue between Jesus and the Apostle Peter.
Because, let's be real, we often read familiar texts without truly observing them, don't we? We kind of just gloss over the details because, well, we assume we already know the story. But that is exactly why we need to put on our detective glasses today. If we really want to spot the hidden clues in this ancient text, we've got to move from just passively seeing the words on the page to actually observing the tiny, deliberate fingerprints left behind by the author.
All right, Section 1, the translation mystery. To kick off our investigation, we actually have to look at the scene of the crime, which, surprisingly, is the English language itself. As it turns out, our modern English translations accidentally destroyed the resolution of this ancient text. It totally hid the evidence of our mystery right in plain sight. Think about it like this. Loving a plate of tacos and loving your family are obviously two entirely different things. I mean, if you treated your family like a taco, we'd have a pretty serious problem. Yet English lazily uses the exact same word for both. It just says love. The original Greek, though, it doesn't suffer from this lazy translation problem at all. It provides distinct, highly specific roots for different types of relational connections, most notably agapao and philia.
Moving on to Section 2, the puzzle on the beach.
Let's set the scene at our primary crime scene. It's that famous beach dialogue in the Gospel of John, chapter 21, between Jesus and Peter. Now remember, this happens right after Peter had previously denied even knowing Jesus 3 separate times. So now they're face to face, and Jesus asks Peter a question 3 times. Now in English, it just reads, "Do you love me?" "Yes, I love you," over and over. But let's actually observe the Greek here. Notice this tiny, completely overlooked clue right in the middle of this exchange. It's the Greek word "nai," which simply means yes. When Jesus asks Peter, "Do you agapao me?" Peter doesn't say no. He says yes. He affirms the question. But then, when he actually finishes his sentence, he answers using a completely different Lego brick. He literally swaps the word for love, saying, "You know that I phileo you."
And this actually happens twice. Jesus asks with agapao, Peter says yes but answers with phileo. But on the third try, something super dramatic happens. Jesus actually switches his vocabulary. He drops his own word and asks Peter using Peter's word, "Do you phileo me?" And the text tells us that Peter was grieved. It just breaks his heart. So the big question is, why? Why does this specific lexical switch make Peter cry? Well, to solve this, we really need to know what these two Lego bricks actually mean.
Which brings us to Section 3, two kinds of love. Okay, let's act as language detectives to strictly define our two terms. And we aren't going to rely on modern dictionaries here. Nope, we're going to define them based on how these exact words behave elsewhere in the historical text of the Johannine writings. First up, we have agapao. Our research shows that agapao isn't just, some warm, fuzzy feeling wearing cozy slippers. Far from it. It's an enacted relational ordering. It's a love that leaves tracks. It literally reorganizes your entire life, your actions, and your historical trajectory for the good of another person. It is fundamentally a love expressed through obedience, giving, and real sacrifice. Now, contrast that with phileo. Phileo is all about cherished personal nearness. It's deep affection, intimate attachment, and mutual delight. Think of it this way. If agapao is the wide-angle lens showing the grand trajectory of a life ordered for someone else, phileo is zooming the camera all the way in. It's zooming in so close that you can actually see the tears on a friend's face. Let's look at Section 4, gathering the evidence.
Now hey, don't just take my word for it. Let's track the fingerprints of these two words across the rest of the source material. We need to validate our definitions and see how the author actually uses them naturally. So the crucial point here is that agapao consistently shows up as an action. For example, God so agapao the world that he gave.
Or Jesus agape his disciples, so what does he do? He physically washes their feet. 2 John tells us that this is agapao, that we walk according to his commandments. See, it's an operational word. This type of love is observed by what you actually do, not just what you feel internally. Basically, if your love never leaves the couch, it is definitely not agapao.
All right, now let's look at the tracks of phileo. We see that the Father phileos the Son by intimately disclosing and showing him everything. And remember when Jesus' friend Lazarus dies? The sisters send a message saying, "He whom you phileo is ill." When Jesus finally arrives and literally weeps at the tomb, the crowd reacts by saying, "See how he phileoed him?" So it consistently appears in these profound moments of personal disclosure, deep friendship, and tearful closeness.
So we can really see how these two distinct, yet totally compatible ways to speak about love operate together. On one hand, agapao is the overarching and acted mission that orients a life, kind of like the cross itself. On the other hand, you've got filio, which is the face-to-face cherished nearness of true friends. And the thing is, they aren't enemies. They aren't just higher and lower versions of love either. Actually, scratch that. It's more like they are two distinct, beautifully compatible ways to speak about love that operate perfectly in tandem.
And that brings us to Section 5, the final question. Armed with all this evidence, let's head back to the beach, because here is the real emotional core of our cold case. You see, Peter didn't grieve simply out of guilt from his past denials. He grieved because of something called lexical convergence. Peter had been saying, "Yes, I am reordering my life for you, and I am speaking to you from my deep, cherished, intimate attachment, filio." When Jesus finally drops his own word and uses Peter's exact word, he enters Peter's specific emotional register. And wow, it creates this overwhelming, literal, heart-exploding realization for Peter. The realization of being fully, intimately known all the way down.
And hey, just to prove this isn't just some made-up modern linguistic theory, let's look at another ancient detective, Jerome. When he translated this exact text into the Latin Vulgate roughly 1600 years ago, he preserved these exact same clues. He used the word diligere for agapao, which means deliberate choice and esteem, and he used amare for filio, meaning deep affection and cherishing. He saw the shift right there in the text, and he made sure to preserve the fingerprints.
Finally, Section 6, Love in Action.
Now, Jesus doesn't just leave Peter there in a puddle of tears. Instead, he translates this newly understood, multi-layered love into very concrete pastoral commands. Think of it like the hungry puppy analogy. If you say you love a puppy, but you never actually feed it, well, your love is just talk, right? Jesus tells Peter, "Feed my lambs." Agapao means bringing the snacks over and over again, because true love takes action. Then he tells him to shepherd the sheep, to actively guide them. Finally, Jesus gives the absolute ultimate command of enacted ordering, "Follow me." Imagine walking through a really spooky forest. Jesus has the flashlight, he knows the trail. Following means putting your feet exactly where your guide steps.
Ultimately, the mystery of Peter's yes shows us that true love doesn't just sit around making big, empty speeches. It affirms the relationship, absolutely, and then it gets to work. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to really chew on today. Is your love just a warm feeling, or does it actively reorganize your life? Does it leave tracks? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, guys. And remember, keep those detective glasses handy.